Hi, hello, welcome. My name's Maddie. I hope you're having a good day. Um, I just read this book. It's called Legendborn by Tracy Dion, and it was amazing. My friend Lisette got it for me around 2 years ago, and I finally read it, so yay. If you don't know what this book's about, it's basically about, it follows our main character Bree, who's 16 years old. Her mom just died, and she goes to a sort of running start kind of situation. So she gets to go to UNC, which is in Northern Carolina, and it's a college. And as a junior and senior of her high school year, she'll be able to take college credits basically. And it's the same school that her mom went to. And at the beginning of the story, her mom is killed in a car accident, and it deals a lot with grief and her processing like what happened to her. So yeah, I would rate this book like a 9.5 out of 10. The reason I would do that, and the reason it's not a 10-star, is because I didn't really feel like as connected to the book until the halfway point. And then as soon as I got there, I was like, okay, I'm here, I'm with it, I'm with the characters, I love them. But because it took me up until that point to like for it to click, it just, I think that was just the issue. That was like the only thing that I had a hard time with. And alongside that, I didn't feel as connected to the side characters except William. So our main characters are Bree, it's from Bree's perspective, but there's also Nick and Selwyn, and it's kind of a love triangle, which isn't, I don't think that's a spoiler, but anyway, I figured I would talk about like spoiler stuff and non-spoiler stuff. But alongside of, on the non-spoiler side, the plot I felt was really well done. I felt like it was like slow building, and then as soon as it got to the halfway point, it took off. It was phenomenal, and I felt like I was actually immersed fully in the story, and it was beautiful. Yeah, that's what I would say about that. For the themes, I think one of the biggest themes of the story was grief, and like dealing with it, and like what if when you learn the truth about something, it's not what you wanted to hear, and how do you deal with that, and even learning more about like the person that passed. Like, does it change how you feel? Like, does it change how it affects you if you know really what happened? And so that was a huge theme. I think also finding yourself amongst that grief, and making new friends. Like, there was a lot of well, again, I also want to make note of the fact that the main character is a young black girl in Northern Carolina, and there's a lot of like subtle and then non-subtle racism, and that's something that I feel like wasn't as explored whenever I was a teenager. Like reading, like I feel like all the main characters of the books that I was exposed to, they were all white, and so I think hearing a perspective from Bree was phenomenal, because I got to see a whole different perspective in an area of the United States that I've never been. So seeing that perspective and like how it affects her, and how like there's a scene with like the police in like the early parts of the book, and like he's very like dismissive, and then there's a scene with like the dean, and then like there's little subtle moments like with Bree's friends later in the book where they're talking about their hair, and then they make a comment about Bree's hair. Like, you know, it wasn't mean or anything, but like it just kind of like it, like they like reach to touch her hair, and then Bree's like why are you touching, like, can you not, like, you know, like you don't need to do that. And so I really, really appreciate that. And there's so many moments where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to worry about that, but there's so many young women that do deal with that. Like she said, like, oh, I can't like sleep over at this place because I don't have my silk bonnet. Or like there's just like moments where I just was like, yeah, I've never had to deal with that, but that's really cool to have that representation. And so I really thought that was cool. But I also really loved the fact that it's a love triangle. Oh my gosh, I don't know why, but I have always loved love triangles, and I blame the Vampire Diaries. That that's great. But and also Glee. Anyway, let's get back on track. So the love triangle is between the three main characters. It's between Bree, Nick, and Selwyn. And I ate it up. I mean, even though it wasn't as prevalent in this book, like you could tell it was like seeds of like an upcoming like there's just tension. And the guy that she's, I guess we'll go into spoilery stuff now, but the guy that she is with by the end of the book, like he can tell that there's something between the other two. So anyway, and I also started the second book, but I'll wait to review that one too. But okay, now let's talk about the magic. I loved the magic. The magic was very interesting. It took me a little bit to get into the whole aspect of it because it's focused on Arthurian legend and basically the descendants of each Knight of the Round Table. Like their descendant can inherit the knight's power, and then they have a shorter lifespan, basically. And so that aspect of the power, learning about that, I was kind of like, okay, I'm not really following. There's these Shadowborn things that the Knights of the Round Table, like, they, not possess, but the descendants of the Round Table inherit the powers to fight the Shadowborn creatures. And Selwyn, which is a Merlin descendant, he thinks that Bree is basically Shadowborn, like a Shadowborn possessed a human. And he's like out to get her for most of the book. It's great. But I would say that I think the most interesting part of the book was Bree's powers, because I mean, I found that the Arthurian like Knights of the Round Table's powers were interesting, but like not as interesting as Bree's powers, because you find out that it's more like her ancestors. She doesn't really know anything about her powers, and then you find out that it's like there's this, her power is called Root, and it's an ancestral thing as well, but the people that use Root think of the like Knights of the Round Table as bad because they're bound, they had like an oath, like bloodbound or something, and that's like it's like seen as evil, and it's like tying an oath to your descendants for like the rest of like your line, basically. And so they see that as like not great. And Bree's power was really, really cool to me because she first like resisted Selwyn's mesmer, which mesmer basically just means that like a Merlin can like look in basically just like a normal person's eyes and like convince them to do something or make them forget something. And so my hand looks so big in the camera. Okay. I've never really used this camera, but basically the mesmer, whatever, she can resist the mesmer, and so she's kind of seen as different. And when she meets Nick, he realizes that she's different, and so they're kind of trying to figure out what happened. Okay, let me start over. So basically, Bree remembers something that a Merlin like took away her memories, and she realized it once Selwyn tried to mesmer her. So she As soon as she figures that out, like that happened the night of her mom's accident, she's like, okay, something else is happening here. Something's going on with my mom. Like someone in this society did something, you know, like it had something to do with her mom's like death. And so that's like the main focus of why that's like the only reason she really joins the Knights of the Round Table. And then alongside that, her dad like was like, okay, for you to be there, I'm gonna sign you up with a therapist. And the therapist knew her mom, shows her about Root, and tells her ancestral, like what she knows about Root. And so that's pretty cool. And so from there, she learns a lot more about it. And then like Bree's journey is just so freaking cool. I cannot stress enough about how much I was just like, whenever we were learning more about Bree's magic, I was so much more like intrigued, and I was like, this is so cool. But like you don't really figure out like everything until like the last, like I'd say the last like 70, maybe 50 pages. And so, well, basically, so for the whole majority of the book, you think that Arthur's, like, they call it Scion, Scion, and that's like the descendant of the Knight of the Round Table. Arthur hasn't been summoned for 250 years, and nobody really knows why, and they're waiting for the big war to happen, like, basically. And Arthur won't come until, like, that war will happen, basically. And they call it Camlan, whatever. I think I'm pronouncing it right, Camlan? Anyway. So, the majority of the book, you think it's Nick. You think Nick is the scion of Arthur. And so he's been raised his whole life to this high regard. They're like, he's our future king. And then something happened with his mom, and like basically something happened with his mom, and so he was like, I don't want any part of this, like these people are evil. It's also a pretty like racist society. It's mainly only white people. And so like whenever Bree comes, there's scenes where like there's these like white women, and they're like, take my umbrella, or like, I want like food, and she's like, I'm not your servant, like, and yeah. But whenever Nick comes back, everybody's like, the king has returned, and everything, like everybody's like, Nick's back, like. And then from there, there's like a competition. There's so much piled into this book. I don't know how it's only like 500 pages. I literally don't know, because there's so many things going on. There's the competition for Bree to become Nick's page. There's the mystery of like what really happened to Bree's mom. There's Bree finding out like her ancestry and like learning about all that. There's Bree taking classes at this like college place, and like and then there's the love triangle, which, you know, isn't as prevalent in this book, but there's so much going on in this book. And then there's like the added part of like, she just lost her mother, she just lost her parent, and like she's trying to figure out how to live without her. And like it was just so well done. Okay, so anyway, where was I went on a tangent. I'll talk a little bit about the grief. I've had some grief in my life. I lost a parent, and so I feel like this book did a really beautiful job of handling it. There's a whole aspect of the story that is incorporated in the beginning. When Bree loses her mom, she has this kind of alternate persona that she calls as After Bree, and it's basically when her walls come up and she's just kind of like guarding herself. And I just feel like it was so well done that I was reading it and I was like, wow, she's portraying this so well that I don't know, I feel like I wish that I read this book whenever I was in high school, and I feel like I would have really appreciated it, you know. And this book didn't come out until 2020, so I was in college, but yeah, I would have. I love it still, like, even though I'm not in college. But now I know I can recommend it to people of any any time, and they'll be able to hear the story and get a whole bunch of different layers of all these themes and like love and, you know. Anyway, I wanted to read a quote from the book. This is the only quote from the book that I actually like. I was reading in bed and I got out of bed and I grabbed a highlighter and I was like, I want this to be the only thing that I highlight, because it was one of the things that just stuck out to me the most. But basically, at this point in the story, Bree realized what happened with her mom, and like it didn't make her feel any better. Basically, it didn't change how she it just didn't change the grief. It honestly, I think it was making it worse, because she was like realizing that like nothing really different happened, you know, and like she was just angry at the fact that it didn't, like, knowing didn't change anything. And so her dad takes her, so she like kind of leaves the secret society and she's like, I'm not coming back. And her dad takes her out to breakfast and is like trying to figure out what's going on. And then he says something and I was like, yes. But he basically says, you can study hard, but only if that's how you want to do it. He gives me a wry smile. No matter what you do, you gotta live your life, kiddo. You gotta be in the world. That's what she would want you to do. He reaches around the table to take both my hands in his. Don't make your life about the loss. Make it about the love. And immediately that reminded me of, I don't know if you've seen WandaVision, but there's a quote that Vision says, and it says, what is grief but love persevering? And that, I felt that was similar. And I don't know, that is one of my favorite quotes of all time. And so make it about the love. It's just, that really impacted me. Because at the end of the day, it's really easy to get caught up in dealing with that. You know, it's really easy to get caught up in the anger and the sadness, but it's really hard to like find the happiness within like the tragedies of this world. And so, especially if you've lost someone, like, it's really hard. But I don't know, that really impacted me. Oh my goodness. But so I also wanted to talk about the history, basically, of the story. I really liked how I felt when I was reading the book and we were on the campus of UNC. I felt like, even though I was like struggling for the first half of the book, I felt like I was still like, some way immersed in the story, as in like I felt like I could like see my surroundings, and I was like, okay, I'm on this campus and I feel like this person actually is like telling the story very well, and I know it's a real campus. And the author said at the end that like she went there, she knows the place really well. But like there was this scene in the book, and basically her therapist and her went to this graveyard, and it had a whole bunch of unmarked graves of like her ancestors. And so I don't know, I felt like that was, and she said that in the author's note that was actually there. And there's like this statue of this guy, and in the memories that she goes back in time basically with her like therapist, whose name is Patricia, by the way. She goes back in time to like review memories, and they can do that together. And during that, they see the guy that has the statue on campus, and he's a horrible person. And it's like, it's just kind of crazy. It was just, I thought it was very interesting how they talk about how like horrible people are memorialized, you know, and it's not talked about like the horrible acts that they do. There was a scene at the end where you're following Bree's ancestor, and she is basically running. She's a slave for the scion of Arthur, like 200 years past. and she's running through like the woods and she's pregnant, and that's a really big spoiler, by the way. But basically she is running through the woods and she wants to escape them, and so she makes a deal where she just wants to be basically invisible, and she wants to be able to evade them. She wants to be able to resist like their mesmer, and she makes a deal that is so bright. She makes a deal that here, I'm gonna close that window real quick. Okay, so I don't remember where I was, but basically there's a scene at the end, and it's when you finally figure out like why Bree has the resistance of like mesmer and all that, and like kind of the mystery of one of the biggest mysteries of the whole book. And okay, I think that's better. All right, so okay, it's the scene at the end. So basically, up until this point, we're kind of like, what's going on with Bree's power? And it's revealed that in Bree's ancestry, her ancestor was a slave of a scion of Arthur, and he was not good to her, and he got her pregnant. This is George, by the way. But he got her pregnant, and she's running from him. And they're very particular. The round table, that's the society's name, that is like the Knight of the Round Tables. It's their group. Basically finding out why Bree had kind of a broken, like her mom didn't know about her grandma's powers, and she had to learn, like, she wasn't able to learn about her mom's powers until like her mom passed, and then she inherited it. So it was like one daughter at a time would receive the power, and it turns out Bree is a medium. And whenever she goes back in time, like when she went back in time with Patricia, she was able to like talk to Patricia's ancestors, and so she was able to like communicate with them. And then later, whenever she's looking back through her ancestors' memories, she's basically just seeing it through Vera, that's her name, Vera's eyes, which was really sad, but it was really beautiful, and it was told in prose. Very well done. I loved it. It was really sad, and it was basically, whenever she made the deal, she understood that one daughter at a time would receive the gift, but it wouldn't be until the mother of the daughter like died, if that makes sense. So like once the mother died, the next daughter would inherit it. And let me try to find like how exactly she worded it, because I thought it was really well done. She says, "I learned that I had just become the third consecutive generation of daughters who lost their mothers at a young age that we know of." That's what Tracy said at the end of the book, which I thought was it's very tragic, but it was a really interesting aspect of the book to include that and make that a magical aspect. I also appreciated that the author like brought her grief into it with losing her mother, even though losing someone is so horrible, like being able to make it into an art is a gift. And yeah, I just really loved it. I loved that Bree is a medium. I thought that was really cool, and it turns out that she's the scion of Arthur, not Nick. And when Vera got pregnant, that's when like the what's it called, like split off. But don't worry, it's not a weird thing like City of Bones where Sorry, spoiler if you haven't seen it or read it. But a huge thing in City of Bones, which I hope so many people know about, is that the love interest is thought to be her brother for most of the book. It's like, is he my brother? Is he not? I want him. Like, it's really weird. It's not like that, so that's good. It's more, he's actually the scion of Lancelot, which I thought was so awesome because, like, they automatically felt like a bond to each other, and I was like, okay, why do they, like, trust each other so much? And it turns out he's freaking Lancelot's. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a love story between Arthur and Lancelot. And I don't know, I thought it fit so much. And wait, it's like a love story between Arthur, Lancelot, and Merlin. Oh, it's fun. Anyway, I just thought that was amazing, and I enjoyed it. But I was telling my husband the other day that I think that, and because, you know, in Arthurian, like, it's known that Lancelot slept with, like, Guinevere, like, Arthur's wife, the queen, and so I was telling my husband that basically I think that Lancelot was always in love with Arthur, and so he took took the one thing that meant the most to him to be as close with him. And I was like, I think that's true. But anyway, it's my own little theory. In conclusion, I loved this book. I loved it a lot. I loved the progression of the three main characters. I think I want to know a lot more about Nick, because we learned about him, but, like, in terms of character, like, growth, I think we got the most with Nick and Selwyn, because, oh, sorry, not Nick and Selwyn, Bree and Selwyn, because Bree, like, learning how to deal with her grief, like, came with a lot of, you know, character growth, and then Selwyn, like, learning a lot about the society that he's in, like, in a really negative light. It changed a lot of his perspectives and stuff about his mom and everything. And so, in conclusion, I want to know more about Nick, and I really hope in the next book they delve even more into the ancestral, like, lines of Bree and Root. I really want to know more about Root, because that was so cool, because each person in Root has their own, like, ability, and it was so cool. Like, I loved it so much. And yeah, anyway, this is technically my second time recording this, but I'm happy if you've made it this far. I hope you'll give it a read, because, I mean, if you don't want to read it because of this video, or how do I word this? If you're just wanting to know what it's about, then, you know, fun, but I highly recommend reading it, because it was well done. And I kind of wish that I had learned more about Arthurian legend, because they mention so many of the Knights of the Round Table that I don't really know, because I know Lancelot and Arthur and Merlin, but the three other ones, like, I think the other one's Owen, but, like, there's so many of them, and I did not know, like, they'd be like, this person's strength, this person's wisdom, this person's this, and I think I want to know more about Root. There's a little I'm a little bit into Bloodmarked right now, and there's, like, a little snippet of Bree going back in time and seeing, like, Arthur's Round Table, which is really cool, but I want to know more about it, and I have the book Mists of Avalon, and I want to read it, because that is Arthurian stuff. But anyway, I have a lot of plans for this channel. I am looking forward to it. I have another video planned that I want to do, so I hope you had a good time listening to me ramble. Yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope you're taking care of yourself. So